Chosen one, an angel has carried message of your death. Wisdom guide. Have you ever felt the shadow of your own grave? Have you stood in crowded rooms but felt completely invisible? Have you wondered why God allows your prayers to echo back unanswered while others seem to walk in effortless blessing? If you're hearing this right now, and I mean really hearing this, heaven has called your name. Not in celebration, not in comfort, but in divine interruption. An angel has flown past the veil of eternity, carrying a scroll with your name written in fire. And the message isn't what you'd expect. It's not about your promotion. It's not about your breakthrough. It's about your death. Yes, your death. But not the kind that stops your heart, the kind that stops your hiding. You see, you've been living as someone you were never meant to be, smiling in photos while crying in bathroom stalls, playing strong for everyone else while your soul screams for someone to carry you. You've been the counselor, the rock, the one who holds it all together. But who holds you when the lights go out and the performance ends? Here's the shocking truth they don't want you to know. The reason your life has felt like one long funeral is because God has been burying everything in you that was never truly alive. Your people-pleasing, your desperate need for approval, your fear of being seen, your addiction to being needed. Why would heaven announce your death before your breakthrough? Because resurrection requires a grave. And chosen one, you've been in yours long enough. This isn't a message for the world scrolling by. This is a summons for the remnant, for the marked, for you, the one whose spirit just quickened because something ancient in you recognizes this voice. If something inside you is trembling right now, if your soul knows this word was written with your tears, comment 333 below. That number marks divine awakening. It marks the end of your spiritual slumber. Before we go deeper, I want to thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just giving, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you sow seeds or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters in the kingdom. And if this message is resonating with your soul, go ahead and let heaven know you're listening. Because what's about to happen next will separate the spectators from the selected. The angel is waiting, the scroll is open, and your name, your real name, is about to be called for the final time. Are you ready to die to who you were, so you can finally live as who you are? The summoning begins now. Why can't you sleep at night anymore? Why do you wake up at 3 a.m. with your heart pounding, feeling like something invisible is calling your name? Why do simple conversations leave you feeling like you're speaking a foreign language to people who used to understand you? Listen to me carefully, dear one. What you're experiencing isn't anxiety, it isn't depression, it isn't a midlife crisis or empty nest syndrome. What's happening to you is a divine summoning. Heaven is calling your name, and your spirit is responding whether your mind understands it or not. You've been living in a costume sewn by trauma, stitched together by disappointment, and tailored by the expectations of people who never truly saw you. But here's what they never told you. God never wrote your story in pain. He wrote it in purpose. And right now, He's tearing off that costume thread by thread because the real you has been suffocating underneath. For months, maybe years, you've felt this strange stirring. Dreams so vivid they feel more real than your waking hours. Sudden tears that come from nowhere. A restlessness that no vacation can cure, no hobby can satisfy. You've tried explaining it to friends, but the words feel inadequate. How do you tell someone that your soul feels homesick for a place you've never been? This is what happens when heaven speaks your name. The prophet Jeremiah knew this feeling. God told him, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." That restlessness you feel, that's the echo of your original design trying to break through decades of compromise. That's your true identity knocking on the door of your consciousness, demanding to be acknowledged. You see, somewhere along the way, the world convinced you that you were ordinary, Life happened: divorce, loss, betrayal, financial struggle, and each blow convinced you to shrink a little more. You learned to dim your light so others wouldn't feel threatened. You learned to silence your voice so others wouldn't feel challenged. You became an expert at being less than who you really are. But God never forgot who He made you to be. Why have you always felt different, even in a crowd? Why do you sense things others miss? Why do people confess their deepest secrets to you at the grocery store? Why do children and animals gravitate toward you without explanation? Because you carry something they can't name, but their spirits recognize the frequency of the chosen. You've spent decades thinking something was wrong with you. The truth is, something was right with you, and the world didn't know what to do with it. That isolation you felt isn't punishment, it's preparation. God has been separating you from everything counterfeit so you could remember what's authentic. Every friendship that faded, every opportunity that closed, every plan that crumbled, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Heaven never lost sight of you. It's the world that mislabeled you. Right now, as you're hearing these words, something ancient is awakening inside you. Your spirit is remembering conversations it had with God before you took your first breath. Dreams He planted in you before you ever learned to doubt. Gifts He wrapped in your DNA before trauma tried to unwrap them. The enemy has worked overtime to convince you that your best years are behind you. That at your age, transformation is impossible. That dreams have expiration dates. But God specializes in resurrections, and He's about to resurrect the real you from the grave of false identity. You feel it, don't you? That trembling in your chest. That's not fear, that's recognition. Your spirit is saying, yes, this is why I'm here. This is what I've been waiting for. Some of you have been carrying names that don't belong to you. Names like failure, too late, not enough, forgotten. But those aren't your names. Those are labels stuck on you by a world that couldn't see past your circumstances to your calling. What's your real name? Not the one on your birth certificate. The one God whispers when He thinks about you. The one that makes angels lean in. The one that makes hell nervous. What is it? Fear tried to bury that name under years of be realistic and act your age, and it's too late now. But you can't bury what's eternal. You can only postpone its resurrection. The summoning you're feeling isn't just about you. There's a generation coming behind you that needs to see what's possible when someone refuses to die with their music still inside them. Your grandchildren need to see what courage looks like in human form. The world needs to witness what happens when someone finally stops apologizing for being chosen. This is your moment of divine interruption. God is breaking through the noise of routine and responsibility to remind you of who you really are. Not who you became to survive, but who you were born to be. Write down your real name, the one fear tried to bury. Not your given name, but the name your spirit knows. Warrior, healer, builder, voice, bridge, breakthrough. Whatever it is, speak it out loud before we move on. Because what's about to happen next requires you to remember who you really are. The angel isn't finished with you. The scroll isn't fully unrolled. And your story, your real story, is just beginning to be written. But first, you have to die to who you thought you were supposed to be. Dear chosen one, you are standing at the grave of who you were never meant to be. And today, we're going to bury that imposter once and for all. You see, there's a version of you that's been walking around in your skin for decades. A version that learned to smile when your heart was breaking. A version that said, I'm fine, when you were drowning. A version that carried everyone else's burdens while your own soul withered in silence. That version, it's dying. And praise God, it needs to. This false self was built brick by brick through every "you're too sensitive," every "stop being so emotional," every time you were told to be grateful for crumbs when your spirit was starving for a feast. It was constructed in the hallways of churches where you learned to perform holiness instead of experiencing it. where you discovered that crying out to God for real answers made people uncomfortable, so you learned to pray pretty prayers that meant nothing. Listen to me carefully. The version of you that survived abuse by becoming invisible needs to die. The version that protected your heart by never fully opening it needs to die. The version that chose safety over calling, comfort over courage, needs to be buried 6 feet under. You've been living in survival mode so long, you forgot what it feels like to actually live. You wake up every morning, putting on the same mask, playing the same role, carrying the same unspoken pain that your grandmother carried, and her mother before her. Generational trauma doesn't just affect your bloodline, it affects your belief line. It convinced you that dreams are for other people, that miracles happen to everyone except you. And now here you are, in what they call your golden years, and you're wondering if it's too late, if you missed your moment. If God forgot about the promises He whispered to your heart when you were young and still believed in impossible things. But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. Your greatest season isn't behind you. It's being birthed right now through the death of everything false. Jesus said it plainly in John 12:24. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. You think you're falling apart, but you're actually falling into purpose. You think you're losing yourself, but you're losing the version of yourself that was never real. The woman who apologizes for taking up space needs to die. The man who believes his best days are in the rearview mirror needs to die. The person who thinks they're too old, too broken, too forgotten, needs to be lowered into the ground so the real you can resurrect. What's falling apart is not your life. It's the lie you had to wear to survive. That lie told you that asking for help makes you weak. That lie convinced you that your pain doesn't matter because others have it worse. That lie whispered that you should be grateful for the leftovers of life because expecting more is selfish. That lie said your dreams expired when you turned 60, 70, 80 years old. But God's dreams for you don't have expiration dates. His calling on your life doesn't retire when you do. In fact, some of God's greatest generals didn't even start their most powerful ministry until their hair was silver and their hands were wrinkled. Moses was 80 when he stood before Pharaoh. Anna was 84 when she proclaimed the Messiah. Abraham was 75 when God told him to pack up and chase a promise. Your age isn't disqualification, it's preparation. But to step into that calling, the version of you that settles has to die. The version that believes the best is behind you has to be buried. The version that thinks God is finished with you needs to take its last breath. I know it's scary. Death always is, even when it's spiritual. You've been wearing that false identity for so long it feels like skin. You've been hiding behind those walls for so many years they feel like home. But those walls aren't protecting you anymore, they're imprisoning you. The loneliness you feel isn't because you're forgotten, it's because your spirit is outgrowing the shell you've been living in. The restlessness in your bones isn't old age, it's new birth trying to break through. The tears that come without warning aren't signs of weakness, they're your soul weeping over a life half-lived. And God is saying, enough, enough pretending, enough surviving, enough apologizing for the fire I put in your belly. It's time to live, really live. But first, what's false must fall. So I want you to do something right now. Get a piece of paper, write down what needs to die, the fear that's ruled your decisions, the people-pleasing that's drained your energy, the lies you've believed about your worth, your age, your purpose. The version of you that plays small to make others comfortable. Write it down. Every lie, every limitation, every excuse. Now fold that paper. Don't throw it away yet. We're not done with it. Because what comes next will shock you. What comes next will change everything. The angel didn't come to bury you. The angel came to unbury the real you. And the real you is about to rise from the ashes of everything false and step into a season so powerful, so anointed, so filled with divine purpose that hell itself will tremble. But first, are you ready to attend your own funeral? Are you ready to mourn the death of the imposter so the authentic can finally breathe? Listen carefully, dear one. What I'm about to tell you will shake the very foundation of everything you thought you knew about yourself. We are gathered here today not to celebrate a life, but to bury one. The life you've been living, the performance, the mask, the version of you that was built to survive instead of thrive, that version is about to be lowered into the ground. And you need to let it die. You see, there's been a funeral procession following you for years. You've felt it in the heavy silence that comes after everyone leaves. You've sensed it in the mirror when you catch your reflection, and for just a moment, you don't recognize who's staring back. This isn't depression talking. This isn't your imagination running wild. This is your true self suffocating under the weight of who you thought you had to be. The Bible tells us in Romans 6:6, our old self was crucified with him so that the body ruled by sin might be done away with. But here's what they don't tell you in Sunday school, that crucifixion doesn't just happen once. It happens every time God calls you higher, every time he strips away another layer of the false identity you've been wearing like armor. Let me ask you something that might cut deep. How many years have you been the strong one? How many decades have you been the one everyone calls when their world falls apart, but when your world crumbles, you cry alone in your car? How long have you been smiling through gritted teeth, saying, I'm fine, when your soul is screaming for someone to see the real you? That's not strength, beloved. That's survival. And survival mode was never meant to be a permanent address. Right now, as I speak these words, there are hidden sins of the spirit that have been eating you alive from the inside out, not the obvious ones, not the drinking or the lying or the cheating. I'm talking about the respectable sins, the ones that wear Sunday clothes and sit in the front pew. Control. The need to orchestrate every outcome because you're terrified of what might happen if you let go. Bitterness, that sweet, familiar poison you've been sipping for so long, you've forgotten what your heart tastes like without it. Secret shame over choices you made decades ago that still wake you up at 3 a.m. And perhaps the most suffocating of all, the fear of being alone, the terror that if people really knew you, they'd walk away. These aren't just character flaws, these are chains. And they've been strangling the life out of your true self for far too long. What if I told you that every moment of divine discomfort you've been experiencing, that restlessness, that feeling like your skin doesn't fit, that sense that you're living someone else's life, what if all of that is actually labor pains? What if the reason you're in such spiritual agony is because your true self is trying to breathe? Jesus said in John 16:21, a woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. Beloved, you are in labor. You have been for months, maybe years. And what's trying to be born is the version of you that God whispered into existence before time began. But here's the brutal truth: birth and death happen simultaneously. For your true self to live, the false self must die. And that death is not going to be quiet. It's going to scream. It's going to fight. It's going to remind you of every reason why you need to stay small, stay safe, stay hidden. Let those ghosts of old stories scream. Let them rage against the dying of their light. They will not survive what's coming. They cannot exist in the presence of who you're becoming. You want to know why this process feels like you're being torn apart? Because you are. God is not interested in renovating your old house. He's not here to give your false self a fresh coat of paint and call it transformation. He is here to tear it down to the foundation and build something completely new, something that looks like heaven instead of survival. This is why Jesus told Nicodemus in John 3:7, you must be born again, not improved, not adjusted, not fine-tuned, born again, from scratch, from the ground up. And here's what will shock you: God is not punishing you with this process. He is delivering you. Every friendship that suddenly feels exhausting. He's delivering you from energy vampires. Every opportunity that mysteriously falls through. He's delivering you from settling for less than his best. every sleepless night where you wrestle with who you're becoming. He's delivering you from the comfortable prison of who you've always been. The Apostle Paul understood this when he wrote in 2 Corinthians 5:17, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here." But notice he didn't say the old gradually fades away. He said it's gone, past tense, finished, dead and buried. So here's what we're going to do right now. We're going to have a funeral, not for your body, but for the version of you built in fear, the one who apologizes for taking up space, the one who dims their light so others feel comfortable, the one who says yes when they mean no, and who has forgotten the sound of their own authentic voice. I want you to pause right here. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of what you're about to release, and say these words out loud, not in your head, but with your voice, because the spiritual realm responds to what is spoken. I release the version of me built in fear. Say it again, louder this time. Let your neighbors hear it. Let heaven hear it. Let hell tremble at the sound of your liberation. Because what's about to emerge from this tomb is not just a better version of you, it's the version of you that makes demons nervous and angels rejoice. The version that was hidden in God before the foundation of the world. Are you ready to find out who that person is? You felt it, didn't you? That moment when everything went silent, when the tears stopped falling, not because the pain ended, but because something deeper took over. When you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back, not because you were broken, but because you were becoming. Dear chosen one, what you experienced wasn't just healing. What happened to you in that dark season wasn't just recovery. You didn't just bounce back from rock bottom. You rose from a grave that was never meant to hold you. They buried you, but they didn't know you were seed. Listen to me carefully. Every person who tried to write your obituary, every voice that declared you finished, every circumstance that felt like your final chapter, they made one fatal mistake. They thought they were witnessing your end. But heaven was orchestrating your beginning. You see, there's a divine law written into the fabric of eternity. What God plants in the ground doesn't stay dead, it transforms. And you, beloved, you were never dying. You were germinating. Think about Joseph, 17 years old, thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold like cattle, falsely accused, forgotten in prison. For 13 years, it looked like his dreams had become his nightmare. But Genesis 50:20 reveals the mystery. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Joseph didn't just survive his pit, he outlived it, he outgrew it. He became too big for the grave they dug for him. And so did you. Every betrayal that felt like it would kill you, it was actually killing what wasn't meant to survive. Every door that slammed shut in your face, heaven was redirecting you towards something your small vision couldn't see. Every night you cried yourself to sleep wondering if God had forgotten your name. He was whispering a new one over your spirit. You think you lost everything, but what if you didn't lose anything? What if everything that fell away simply couldn't handle the weight of who you were becoming? Look at Job. In one day, on single day, he lost his children, his wealth, his health, his reputation. His own wife told him to curse God and die. His friends gathered around him like vultures, picking apart his character, trying to find fault in his foundation. For months, Job sat in ashes, scraping his sores with broken pottery, wondering why the God he served had allowed such devastation. But here's what they didn't understand. Job wasn't being punished, he was being refined. And when the refining was complete, Job 42:10 tells us, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Twice as much. Not just restoration, multiplication. You didn't just survive your season of loss. You outlived what was meant to end you. And now, right now, as you're listening to these words, heaven is preparing to flip the page on your story. Can you feel it? That stirring in your chest, that quickening in your spirit. That's not hope returning. That's resurrection power awakening. This is the moment when God looks at the grave they tried to seal you in and says, "Rise." Not because the pain is over, but because the purpose is beginning. Not because the battle is finished, but because the victory was always yours. Esther understood this. Hidden in a palace, concealed for years, watching her people face annihilation. She could have stayed silent, stayed safe, stayed small, but Mordecai's words burned in her spirit. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this, for such a time as this. Not for such a time as was comfortable, not for such a time as was convenient, but for such a time as this, the moment when everything you've been through suddenly makes sense. Your pain wasn't pointless, your tears weren't wasted, your wilderness wasn't wandering. It was all preparation for this moment when heaven declares, "Now is your time." You're not the same person who entered that dark season. You can't be. Fire changes everything it touches. And you, dear one, you've been through the fire and emerged not as ash, but as pure gold. Your voice carries different weight now. Your prayers move mountains because they've been forged in valleys. Your presence shifts atmospheres because your spirit has been recalibrated to heaven's frequency. You speak, and things change because you've learned to speak from your scars, not your fears. This isn't healing. This is resurrection. And resurrection doesn't just bring you back to where you were. Resurrection brings you forward to where you were always meant to be. Jesus didn't rise from the dead to go back to carpentry. He rose with keys to death and hell, with all authority in heaven and earth. What keys are you carrying now? What authority has been forged in your furnace? What doors are about to open because you chose to believe God even when you couldn't see Him? Right now, as these words wash over your spirit, something ancient is awakening. Not just hope power, not just faith fire, not just survival sovereignty. You feel it, don't you? That rumbling in your soul, that's not your past trying to resurface. That's your future trying to break through. The grave couldn't hold Jesus. The pit couldn't contain Joseph. The ashes couldn't bury Job. And whatever tried to bury you has just discovered the same eternal truth. What God plants doesn't stay dead. You're not rising to prove anything to anyone. You're rising because resurrection is written into your spiritual DNA. You're rising because heaven has an assignment with your name on it. You're rising because this world needs what only your story can carry. If you feel your spirit stirring right now, if something inside you is breaking free from the tomb they tried to seal you in, declare it in the comments. 999, I rise. That number marks completion, transformation, and the end of one season and the beginning of another. It's your declaration to heaven and earth that what was meant to kill you has only made you stronger. Because, chosen one, your resurrection isn't just beginning, it's already here. The angel didn't come with good news. Angels rarely do. They come with assignments. And tonight, the assignment has your name on it. You want to know why your life has felt like a battlefield, while others seem to waltz through meadows. You want to know why every door you've knocked on has either slammed shut or opened to reveal another hallway of closed doors. You want to know why you've prayed until your knees bled and your voice cracked, only to hear silence echo back from heaven. Here's why. Because you were never meant for the easy path. You were marked before you took your first breath. Listen to me carefully. In Revelation 5-8, John sees something that will shatter your understanding of prayer. The 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's holy people. Your prayers aren't disappearing into cosmic void. They're being collected in golden bowls before the throne of God. Every midnight cry, every whispered plea when you thought no one was listening, every time you fell to your knees in that bathroom stall at work, begging God to give you strength for just one more day. Those weren't unanswered prayers. Those were ingredients. Heaven has been brewing something with your tears. And tonight, the bowl is full. But here's what's going to shock you. The reason you've been fighting so hard isn't because you're unlucky. It's because you're marked. Romans 11:29 declares something that will either terrify you or liberate you. For God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. Irrevocable. That means permanent, unchangeable, written in divine stone. You can't return your calling like a bad Christmas sweater. You can't trade it in for an easier assignment. You can't quit being chosen, even when being chosen feels like a curse. You've been trying to live a normal life with an abnormal calling. That's why nothing fits. That's why you feel like a square peg being hammered into a round hole. That's why your soul feels restless even in your most peaceful moments. You were born with a frequency that this world can't tune into. And the more you try to dim that frequency to fit in, the more it screams inside you. The more you try to be what they expect, the more your spirit rebels. The more you try to play small, the more your calling grows loud. Do you know what those trials were? Those betrayals that felt like they would kill you. Those losses that made you question if God even knew your address. Those weren't punishments, those were validations. Heaven's courtroom was in session, and you were being tested for the weight of glory you're about to carry. Job didn't suffer because God hated him. Job suffered because God trusted him with a level of testing that would reveal the unshakable foundation of his faith. David wasn't hunted by Saul because he was cursed. David was hunted because heaven had already crowned him, and hell was trying to prevent the coronation. Your enemies haven't been attacking your weakness. They've been attacking your assignment. The enemy doesn't waste bullets on people who pose no threat. He reserves his heaviest artillery for the ones who carry kingdom keys. You think you've been walking through a valley of shadows. You've been walking through a refinery. Every fire was calibrated. Every pressure was measured. Every breaking point was monitored by the one who promised never to give you more than you could bear. But here's the moment that changes everything. Right now, in this instant, the scroll with your name is opening in heaven's court. Not the name your parents gave you. Not the name on your birth certificate. The name God whispered when he formed you in secret. The name that carries your assignment. The name that makes demons tremble and angels stand at attention. And God is not calling your potential tonight. Potential is just a pretty word for not yet. God is calling your permission. Permission to stop playing small. Permission to stop apologizing for the fire in your eyes. Permission to stop hiding your light under the bushel of other people's comfort. You've been asking God, when will my time come? But God has been asking you, when will you give me permission to use what I've already placed inside you? The gifts are already there. The anointing is already downloaded. The authority is already transferred. The only thing missing is your yes, not your perfect yes, not your confident yes, just your surrendered yes. You know that folded piece of paper I told you to hold earlier? The one with all the lies written on it about who you're supposed to be. Get it out. Look at it one more time. See those words that have kept you in chains for decades. Too old, too broken, too late. Not qualified, not chosen. Here's what I want you to do right now. Don't wait until the video ends. Don't put it off until tomorrow. Right now, while heaven is listening, while the scroll is open, while the angel is waiting for your response. Burn it, tear it, bury it, flush it down the toilet. I don't care what you do with it, but that false identity has no place in the next chapter of your story. The person who believed those lies is the one who had to die. The person listening to my voice right now is the one who was always meant to live. The scroll has opened. Your name has been called. The assignment is being released. The only question left is this. Will you step into the courtroom of heaven and receive what's already been decreed in your favor? Because chosen one, ready or not, your resurrection begins now. You made it through the valley of bones. You survived the dismantling. You endured the silence when heaven seemed to turn its face away. But here's what nobody told you about resurrection. It doesn't just bring you back, it brings you back different. The cross was not the end, beloved. It was the transfer point, the place where your old citizenship was revoked and your new identity was sealed in blood. You didn't just die to rise again, you died to rise higher. Look at your hands right now. These are not the same hands that once grasped for approval. These hands have been through fire. They've released what wasn't yours to hold. They've been emptied so they could be filled with something eternal. When you lay these hands on others now, something transfers. When you speak, atmospheres shift. When you enter a room, darkness notices. But let me ask you something that might sting. How long are you going to keep apologizing for who you've become? How long will you dim this light because it makes others uncomfortable? You've been crucified with Christ. Galatians 2:20 says you no longer live, but Christ lives in you. So why are you still trying to resurrect the corpse of who you used to be? Here's the truth they don't want you to know at this stage of life. Your greatest years are not behind you. Your most powerful impact is not in your rearview mirror. The enemy has been whispering lies about your expiration date, but heaven sees your coronation date. You are not winding down, you are being wound up for kingdom deployment. You see, when God takes you through death and resurrection at this season of life, He's not just healing your past, He's activating your future. Every gray hair is a crown of wisdom. Every wrinkle tells the story of battles won. Every scar is proof that you didn't just survive, you overcame. You are not aging out of purpose, you are aging into authority. The Apostle Paul understood this. In 2 Timothy 4-7, facing his final chapter, he didn't say, "I'm tired, I'm done." He declared, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." Paul knew that his greatest victory wasn't in his youth, it was in his endurance. His crown wasn't for starting well, but for finishing strong. But here's where it gets dangerous for the kingdom of darkness. You no longer care about fitting in. You've been to the grave and back. You know what really matters now. While others chase comfort, you chase calling. While others fear death, you've already died. While others worry about reputation, you walk in revelation. This is why the enemy fought you so hard in those wilderness years. He knew what you'd become on the other side. He saw the fire in your bones, the oil on your head, the sword in your mouth. He tried to kill you in the desert because he was terrified of who you'd be in the promised land. And now look at you. You don't need their approval anymore. Their rejection doesn't wound you, it redirects you. Their silence doesn't silence you, it amplifies heaven's voice. You've been crowned with something they can't give and can't take away. You carry the frequency of the resurrection. When you walk into your family gatherings now, something is different. When you speak to your children and grandchildren, words carry weight they never had before. You're not just sharing opinions, you're dispensing wisdom soaked in sacrifice. You're not just telling stories, you're transferring inheritance. The battles you won in secret are becoming blessings they inherit in public. This is your late life legacy, chosen one. Not just what you built, but who you became. Not just what you accumulated, but what you surrendered. Your grandchildren won't remember your bank account, but they'll never forget the way you prayed. They won't inherit your possessions, but they'll carry your prayers. The spiritual DNA you're releasing now will impact generations you'll never meet. But let me tell you something that will rock your theology. You were never meant to be liked. You were meant to be known by heaven. You were never called to be popular. You were called to be powerful. You were never meant to be comfortable. You were meant to be consecrated. Jesus himself said in John 15:19, "If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world." Stop trying to belong to a world that crucified your Savior. You belong to a kingdom that conquered death. This is your resurrection frequency, and it's time to walk in it fully. When you enter that church now, you don't just attend, you shift the atmosphere. When you pray over your family, you don't just hope, you decree. When you speak life over broken situations, you don't just encourage, you resurrect. The crown you wear now is invisible to human eyes, but undeniable to spiritual forces. Angels recognize your authority, demons flee from your presence. Heaven celebrates your arrival in every room. You are no longer just living, you are reigning in life through Christ Jesus. So stop apologizing for the oil that drips from your life. Stop dimming your light because others choose to stay in darkness. Stop whispering what God told you to declare. You have been raised with Christo. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Your time is not running out, beloved. Your time is just beginning. This is not your sunset season. This is your coronation moment. Walk in the majesty of who you've become. Speak with the authority of what you've overcome. Move with the confidence of someone who knows their name is written in the Lamb's book of life. If you've buried who you were and crowned who you are, share this message. It's not content, it's a transmission. Someone in your circle needs to know that resurrection is real, that comebacks are possible, that it's never too late to become who God always saw you to be. The cross was your transfer point. Now walk in your crown. You thought the silence meant he stopped listening. You thought the delay meant he changed his mind. You thought the emptiness meant you missed your moment. But what if I told you that every unanswered prayer, every closed door, every night you cried yourself to sleep wondering if God forgot your address, what if all of that was actually heaven's strategy, not heaven's abandonment? Listen to me, chosen one. The years you've spent feeling invisible weren't wasted years. They were hidden years. And there's a profound difference between being forgotten and being protected. You kept showing up. You kept praying. You kept believing when belief felt like swallowing glass. You sat in that same pew, lifted those same hands, whispered those same desperate pleas into the darkness, and you heard nothing back. Not a whisper, not a sign, not even an echo of your own voice bouncing off heaven's walls. The silence was so loud it nearly drove you insane. You started questioning everything, your faith, your calling, your worth. You wondered if maybe you misheard God's voice in the first place. Maybe that dream was just wishful thinking. Maybe that burning in your chest was just heartburn, not holy fire. You won't admit this to anyone, but you've wondered if God changed his mind about you. If he looked at your mistakes, your failures, your moments of weakness, and decided you weren't chosen material after all. You've wondered if he gave your assignment to someone more qualified, someone who didn't stumble as much, someone who didn't doubt as deeply. But let me take you to a prison cell in Egypt. Joseph sits in chains, rotting in a dungeon for a crime he didn't commit. This is the same Joseph who had dreams of ruling, visions of greatness, divine encounters that felt more real than reality itself. Yet here he is, forgotten by the cupbearer, ignored by the world, seemingly abandoned by the God who gave him those dreams. 13 years. 13 long, silent years between the dream and the throne. 13 years of wondering if he misunderstood God's voice. 13 years of watching other prisoners come and go while he remained. Do you think Joseph didn't question? Do you think he didn't wonder if God had forgotten him in that cell? But Genesis 39:2 tells us something that changes everything. The Lord was with Joseph. Not just when he was interpreting Pharaoh's dreams, not just when he was ruling Egypt, but in the prison, in the silence, in the waiting. God was there, working in ways Joseph couldn't see, preparing a man in private for a public assignment that would save nations. Take Moses. 40 years in the wilderness, tending sheep, probably wondering if his days of significance were behind him. He'd tried to deliver Israel in his own strength and failed miserably. Now he's a fugitive, a has-been, watching flocks instead of leading people. The silence of the desert must have felt like divine rejection. But Exodus 3:1 says Moses was keeping the flock beyond the wilderness, beyond the visible, beyond the familiar, beyond where most people dare to go. And it was there, in the depths of hiddenness, that God appeared in a burning bush. The 40 years weren't punishment. They were preparation. God was making a deliverer in the wilderness, forging a leader in isolation, creating a man who could carry the weight of a nation's freedom. Even Jesus, the Son of God himself, spent 30 years hidden before 3 years of ministry. 30 years. Can you imagine? The Savior of the world, the light of lights, the hope of all humanity, and for 3 decades he was invisible to the world that desperately needed him, working in a carpenter's shop, living in obscurity, waiting for his Father's timing. Why? Because premature revelation leads to destruction. Because public ministry without private preparation equals public failure. Because God doesn't just call the ready, he makes the called ready. And that process happens in hiddenness, in silence, in the place where no one can see but God. You see, dear one, silence isn't God's absence, it's God's strategy. When heaven goes quiet, it doesn't mean God stopped caring. It means he's working on something so significant, so powerful, so precisely timed that even heaven holds its breath while he crafts it. He buried you not to hide you, but to root you, like a seed that must be planted in darkness before it can reach toward light, like a diamond that must endure pressure before it can reflect brilliance, like gold that must pass through fire before it can reveal its purity. Your hidden years haven't been empty years, they've been pregnancy years. God has been forming something inside you that couldn't be birthed prematurely. Your character, your compassion, your unshakable faith, your deep well of wisdom that can only come from drinking from the cup of suffering and still choosing to trust. The enemy whispered that you missed your chance. But what if heaven was silent because your crown was still cooling in the fire? What if God wasn't speaking because he was too busy preparing a stage worthy of your calling? What if the delay wasn't denial but divine positioning? You thought he forgot you. No, chosen one. He was protecting what wasn't ready to be revealed. Because when God finally opens his mouth and calls your name, when that prison door swings open, when that burning bush ignites, when that angel of the Lord appears, the world won't just see you rise. They'll see the fingerprints of God all over your story. Every year of silence will become a year of testimony. Every moment of hiddenness will become evidence of his faithfulness. Every tear shed in secret will water someone else's hope in public. The silence is breaking. The hidden years are ending. Something is stirring in the spirit realm, and your name is being called from the courts of heaven. If you've been hidden but you know God's preparing your reveal, if you've endured the silence but sensed the sound of his voice approaching, comment 555 below. That number represents divine change, the end of waiting, and the beginning of walking into everything God has been preparing for you in secret, because what's coming next will prove that every moment of hiddenness was worth it. The veil is about to be lifted, and the world is about to see what God has been building in the shadows of your life. Listen to me, dear one. What I'm about to tell you will either set you free or send you running. But you've run long enough, haven't you? The hammer that shattered your life, it didn't come to destroy you. It came to free the masterpiece inside the marble. You see, God is not a vandal. He's a sculptor. And every blow you felt, every crack that split your heart open, every moment you thought you were being torn apart, you were actually being carved into something eternal. But they told you different, didn't they? They said you were broken, damaged goods, used up, finished. The church whispered behind your back when your marriage fell apart. Your family turned their faces when addiction grabbed your throat. The world labeled you a failure when bankruptcy emptied your bank account. The doctors shook their heads when the diagnosis came back with words that sounded like a death sentence. You believed them. You wore their shame like a burial shroud. You carried their disappointment like stones in your pockets. But here's what heaven wants you to know. You were never the thing that happened to you. You were not the addiction. You were not the affair. You were not the bankruptcy. You were not the diagnosis. You were not the divorce papers. You were not the pink slip. You were not the empty nest. You were not the nursing home visit. You were the survivor of it all. Do you hear me? The real youth, the eternal you, was buried underneath the breaking. But burial is not the end for the chosen. It's preparation for resurrection. Think about Lazarus, 4 days dead, stinking, wrapped in grave clothes. His sisters wept. His friends mourned. The whole town had written his obituary. But Jesus saw something different. He didn't see death, he saw sleep. He didn't see an ending, he saw an awakening. Lazarus, come forth. And death had to release what it never truly owned. That's your story too. You've been in the tomb of other people's opinions, wrapped in the grave clothes of shame, bound by the limitations they placed on you. But heaven is calling your name. Not the name they gave you, broken, worthless, finished. Your real name. The one written in the Lamb's book of life before the foundation of the world. You see, every wound was a window. Every betrayal was a breakthrough in disguise. Every loss was heaven making room for gain. David knew this when he wrote, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." Your night has been long, hasn't it? Decades long, but morning is breaking. I know what you're thinking. But you don't understand what I've done. You don't know how far I've fallen. You don't know how many times I've crawled back to the very thing that broke me. Yes, I do. You've returned to that bottle when the pain got too loud. You've gone back to that relationship that drained your soul because loneliness felt worse than abuse. You've accepted crumbs from tables that should have been serving you banquets. You've said yes when your spirit screamed no because you were terrified of being alone with the truth. But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. Even your returns were part of the refining. Every time you went back, you learned a little more about who you didn't want to be. Every relapse revealed another layer of the lie. Every broken promise to yourself was actually a broken chain from your past. Isaiah 61:3 says, God gives beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. Notice, he doesn't say beauty instead of ashes. He says beauty for ashes. Your ashes are the raw material for your miracle. The abuse you survived it gave you compassion that can heal broken hearts across the world. The addiction you overcame it gave you authenticity that can speak truth to those still trapped. The betrayal you endured it gave you wisdom that can spot deception from miles away. The diagnosis you're fighting it gave you courage that inspires armies. You are not the wounds they gave you. You are the wisdom they awakened. Stop apologizing for your scars. They're not signs of your weakness, they're proof of your strength. Stop hiding your story. It's not your shame, it's your superpower. Stop believing the lie that you're damaged goods. You're not damaged, you're seasoned. You're not broken, you're broken open. And broken open is how the light gets in. The Apostle Paul had a thorn in the flesh. He begged God 3 times to remove it. But God said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Your weakness became the very place where heaven's strength flows through you. You think your past disqualifies you? Moses was a murderer who led a nation. David was an adulterer who wrote the Psalms. Peter denied Christ 3 times and became the rock of the church. Paul persecuted Christians and penned half the New Testament. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And you, dear one, have been called from the foundation of the world. The real you was never lost. The real you was just buried under years of survival, under decades of other people's expectations, under the weight of trying to earn love instead of receiving it freely. But the hammer has done its work. The chisel has carved away everything that wasn't you. And what remains is magnificent. What emerges is anointed. What rises is unstoppable. If this feels like your spirit is sobbing, if recognition is flooding your soul like a dam breaking open, type, "It was never the end, it was the unveiling." Let the healing start. Let the real you breathe again. Because what's about to happen next will shake the very foundations of how you see yourself, your future, and your divine destiny. Dear chosen one, they lied to you about transformation. They painted pretty pictures of spiritual awakening, soft music, gentle light, peaceful meditation. They told you rebirth would feel like floating on clouds, like warm embraces from heaven. But that's not what happened to you, is it? Your awakening felt like warfare, like being torn apart at 3 a.m. with no witnesses, like drowning in your own tears while the world slept soundly around you. And you wondered if this is God's plan. Why does it feel like hell? Here's the truth they don't preach from comfortable pulpits. Butterflies don't grow wings, they disintegrate first. They become liquid. They lose every recognizable part of what they were. The caterpillar doesn't get an upgrade, it gets utterly destroyed, so something entirely new can emerge. You thought you were breaking down, but you were breaking open. Look at your life these past months, maybe years. The sleepless nights when anxiety gripped your chest like a vice. The doctor visits that revealed nothing but left you feeling everything. The relationships that crumbled without explanation. The dreams that died in your hands like flowers in winter. The prayers that echoed back empty, leaving you wondering if God had changed his phone number. You wept. You broke. You screamed into pillows at 2 a.m. when the weight of being strong for everyone else finally crushed your spirit. You questioned your sanity, your faith, your very existence, and still somehow, some way you showed up. Why? Because something in you refused to quit. Something deeper than your pain, older than your trauma, stronger than your fear. That something was the Spirit of the living God holding you together, even as everything else fell apart. The Bible doesn't sugarcoat this process. Look at Jacob, wrestled with an angel all night and walked away limping. His hip was dislocated, but his name was changed. He was wounded, but he was blessed. Genesis 32:24, -28 tells us he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." That's not gentle spirituality, that's violent faith. Consider Job. God allowed everything to be stripped from him, his children, his wealth, his health. His own wife told him to curse God and die. Job 2-9. For months he sat in ashes, scraping his sores with broken pottery, crying out to heaven for answers that didn't come. But in that pit, in that pain, in that complete destruction of his old life, something eternal was being forged. You see, dear one, your breaking wasn't random. It was sacred ground. Every tear that fell in secret was watering something holy. Every sleepless night was keeping vigil over your spiritual transformation. Every moment you wanted to give up but didn't was defying hell itself. The enemy wanted your breakdown to be your end, but God used it as your beginning. Think about this. When a woman gives birth, is it peaceful? Does life emerge from comfort? No. It's violent, messy, painful. There's screaming, there's blood, there's agony that makes you think you might die. But then life breaks through. New creation emerges from the chaos. Your spiritual rebirth follows the same pattern. You've been in labor with your new self. The contractions of loss, the pushing through pain, the feeling like you couldn't survive another moment that wasn't your destruction. That was your delivery room. Remember Lazarus? John 11:43-44. Jesus didn't whisper gently. He cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth!" And when resurrection power hit that tomb, it was explosive. Lazarus came out bound in grave clothes, and Jesus had to command others to loose him and let him go. You've been wrapped in grave clothes too, bound by other people's opinions of who you should be, tied up in trauma that happened decades ago, suffocated by expectations that were never yours to carry, wrapped in the burial cloth of a false identity that kept you dead while you were still breathing. But heaven is calling your name with a loud voice. Come forth. The old youth, the people-pleaser, the perfectionist, the one who carried everyone else's burden had to be shattered so the spirit-filled version could be released. The version that speaks with authority because it's been through hell and back. The version that prays with power because it knows what desperation sounds like. The version that can minister to broken hearts because it remembers the sound of its own heartbreaking. This is why your pain was permitted. This is why your prayers seemed unanswered. This is why you had to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Because on the other side of that valley, you don't just survive, you reign. Your tears weren't waste, they were oil. Your screams weren't weakness, they were warfare. Your breaking wasn't failure. It was preparation for the anointing that only comes through crushing. Now you understand why Jesus said in John 12:24, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it produces much fruit." You had to fall. You had to die to who you were, because who you were becoming was too big for who you used to be. The rebirth is violent, yes, but it is holy, sacred, ordained. And now you stand on the other side, not unscathed, but unshakable, not unmarked, but unmovable, not unchanged, but unstoppable. Right now, I need you to do something. Don't just read these words, receive them. Don't just hear this message, declare it. Say this out loud, with authority, with conviction. I allow the death, I welcome the birth. Don't just type it in the comments, speak it over your life. Let the atmosphere hear you. Let the enemy know you're not the same person who entered this trial. Let heaven witness your declaration of war against everything that tried to keep you small. Because something else is coming, something the old you could never have handled. And that's exactly why the old you had to go. Listen carefully. Chosen one. The angel didn't deliver that message of death as punishment. It was preparation. Because heaven has been trying to crown you for years, but the crown keeps slipping off your head. Why? Because crowns don't fit on false selves. You've been living as an imposter in your own life, playing small to make others comfortable, apologizing for your wisdom because it threatens their ignorance, dimming your light because someone told you that brightness was prideful. But here's what they never told you. Humility isn't hiding. Humility is knowing exactly who God made you to be and refusing to be anything less. For decades, you've worn masks that were never meant for your face. The good Christian mask that smiles while your soul screams. The "I'm fine" mask that covers the deep ache of never being truly seen. The "I don't need anything" mask that hides your desperate hunger for real connection. But masks, dear one, cannot wear crowns. You want to know why your prayers felt like they hit the ceiling? Because you were praying as someone you're not. You want to know why doors stayed closed despite your qualifications? Because God was protecting your calling from your counterfeit identity. You want to know why relationships kept failing? Because intimacy requires authenticity, and you were showing up as a stranger to yourself. But death changes everything. The death of your false self creates space for your true identity to breathe. And when the real you finally stands up, the crown slides perfectly into place. What does a resurrected life actually look like? It looks like walking into rooms and feeling the atmosphere shift, not because you're trying to make an impact, but because impact follows authenticity. It looks like having conversations where you no longer explain yourself to people who were never meant to understand you. It looks like boundaries that aren't built from anger, but from clarity, knowing what belongs in your space and what doesn't. Your discernment becomes razor sharp. You feel deception before it opens its mouth. You sense spiritual warfare from 3 rooms away. You know when someone is operating from their wound instead of their worth. And instead of fixing them, you protect your peace. Your joy stops asking for permission. You laugh loud in restaurants. You dance in grocery store aisles. You sing off-key in your car without caring who's watching. Because joy that requires approval isn't joy, it's performance. And you're done performing. Here's where it gets controversial. The religious spirits that have been whispering in your ear for years are about to get loud. They'll tell you that at your age you should be settling down, not rising up. They'll tell you that sexuality after 60 is inappropriate. They'll tell you that wanting financial freedom is selfish. They'll tell you that speaking your truth is rebellious. But let me ask you something that might shock your system. When did God ever call his people to shrink? When did Jesus tell the woman at the well to stay quiet about her testimony? When did Paul tell Timothy to wait until he was older to preach? When did David apologize for slaying Goliath because it made other soldiers feel inadequate? The enemy has used religious guilt to keep you in spiritual poverty for far too long. He convinced you that wanting more was greedy, that asking for healing was selfish, that believing for breakthrough was presumptuous. but Isaiah 61 shatters every lie he whispered. He will give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, a crown of glory instead of mourning. A crown of glory, not a participation trophy, not a consolation prize. A crown that announces to every demon in hell and every angel in heaven that you are royalty walking the earth. You no longer explain your worth, you embody it. You don't defend your decisions to people who don't have the spiritual clearance to understand them. You don't justify your boundaries to those who profit from your exhaustion. You don't apologize for taking up space that God carved out specifically for you. This is spiritual warfare at its finest, not screaming at devils, but walking in such unshakable identity that darkness has no choice but to flee. Your presence alone becomes a weapon. Your peace becomes a shield. Your joy becomes a sword that cuts through every lie the enemy ever told about your future. But here's the part that will either offend you or liberate you. This crown comes with a cost. It will cost you fake friends who only loved your dysfunction. It will cost you family members who preferred you broken. It will cost you the version of yourself that begged for crumbs when you were born to own the bakery. Some of you are sitting there thinking, but what will people say? What if I'm wrong? What if this is just pride? Listen to me carefully. The same spirit that told Mary she was favored is the same spirit telling you that your season of hiding is over. The same voice that called Moses from the burning bush is the same voice calling you from your comfort zone. This is not your makeover. This is your takeover. Not of other people's territories, but of the ground that has your name written on it in heaven's property records. Not through manipulation or force, but through the undeniable authority that comes with knowing who you are in God. The false self is finally dying. Can you feel it gasping for air? Good. Let it suffocate on the truth of your identity. Let it choke on the oil of your anointing. Let it drown in the flood of favor that's about to break over your life. Right now, before we go any further, I need you to do something that might feel uncomfortable, but is absolutely necessary. I need you to say out loud, and I mean out loud, I wear the crown, I release the corpse. Say it until you feel something shift in your spirit. Then type crowned in the comments below. Because what's coming next will require royal authority. And royalty doesn't whisper. Royalty declares. You didn't survive 70, 80, 90 years of breathing just to retire your voice when heaven needs it most. You didn't endure decades of heartbreak, betrayal, loss, and resurrection just to spend your final chapters in spiritual silence, watching Netflix and waiting for glory. Listen to me careful. God didn't raise you from that deathbed to give you more time. He gave you more assignment. He didn't heal your broken heart to make you comfortable. He healed it to make you dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. You think your best years are behind you. That's the enemy's greatest lie, whispered to those who carry the most oil. You think because your hair is gray and your knees creak that your calling has expired. That's hell's propaganda designed to steal your final act of obedience. Here's what they don't want you to know. Your anointing has been marinating in decades of pain, wisdom, and fire. Every tear you've cried has seasoned your authority. Every loss you've endured has deepened your compassion. Every betrayal you've survived has sharpened your discernment. You are not a retirement case. You are a spiritual weapon of mass destruction, and the enemy knows it. Think about Moses 80 years old when God called him to deliver a nation. 80, when the world would have given him a gold watch and a rocking chair. Heaven gave him a burning bush and a mission that changed history. Who am I to go to Pharaoh? He asked. And God replied, I will be with you. The same God who was with Moses is with you right now, looking at your weathered hands and saying, these hands have work left to do. You've been seasoned by suffering. You've been refined by rejection. You've been purified by pain. And now you carry something that 20-year-olds can't manufacture: authenticity forged in fire, wisdom earned through wounds, and authority that only comes from surviving what should have killed you. Your grandchildren need to see you rise, Your bloodline is waiting for someone to break the generational curse of silence, of settling, of playing it safe. You are the Joshua of your family tree, called to cross over and possess the land that fear kept your ancestors from claiming. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people your age have chosen the grave over the glory. They've chosen retirement over resurrection. They've chosen comfort over calling. They sit in chairs, complaining about what's wrong with the world, but never standing up to be the change God commissioned them to create. Not you. You're different. You're here because your spirit refuses to die quietly. God didn't just resurrect you for peace, He did it for kingdom war. Spiritual warfare that requires soldiers who've already been tested, who've already proven they can stand when everything falls apart, who've already demonstrated they won't bow when hell throws its worst. You have fire left, real fire, not the manufactured passion of youth, but the steady, unshakable flame of someone who has walked through every valley and emerged, still believing. Someone who has been broken, but not bitter. Someone who has been wounded, but not weakened. Do you realize there's someone, somewhere, who won't make it through their darkest night unless you open your mouth and speak life? There's a family member drowning in addiction who needs to hear your testimony of deliverance. There's a neighbor contemplating suicide who needs to see your evidence that God specializes in resurrection. Your voice carries decades of proof that God is faithful. Your presence radiates the peace that passes understanding because you've been through understanding and came out the other side. Your prayers have weight because they've been tested in the furnace of real life. The time for hiding is over. You've walked through the fire of loss, betrayal, sickness, and disappointment. You've been in the valley of the shadow of death and emerged carrying light. Now walk in the glory of that victory. Stop apologizing for taking up space. Stop shrinking to make others comfortable. Stop dimming your light because younger voices seem louder. Your light doesn't flicker, it burns steady because it's been fed by trials they haven't even imagined yet. Psalm 92:14 declares, "They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green." That's not poetry, that's prophecy about you. You're not drying up. You're ripening. You're not fading away. You're stepping into your most fruitful season. But fruit requires action. Legacy demands movement. Purpose requires you to get up from that chair of comfort and step into the assignment heaven has been preparing you for your entire life. What has God been whispering to your spirit? What dream did you bury because others said you were too old? What calling did you silence because society told you to step aside for the next generation? The next generation needs mentors, not spectators. They need generals, not bench warmers. They need voices seasoned with wisdom, not just volumes cranked up with passion. Your assignment is waiting. It's been patient, but it won't wait forever. The clock isn't counting down your remaining days, it's counting down the remaining opportunities for you to be obedient to what God has placed in your heart. This is your final call to greatness. Your last chance to leave a legacy that echoes beyond your last breath. Your ultimate opportunity to prove that age is just a number when God is your strength. If you're ready to walk in assignment, comment "Send me" below. Then write down what God's calling you to start. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because someone's breakthrough is connected to your obedience. The grave couldn't hold Jesus, and it can't hold your calling either. Beloved, as we reach the end of this sacred journey together, I need you to remember 3 eternal truths that will carry you forward. First, your death was not your defeat, it was your delivery. Every painful moment, every crushing blow, every season of silence was God extracting the false to reveal the real you. You are not the same person who began this message. Something has shifted, something has awakened, something immortal has been born. Second, your assignment is not optional, it's ordained. You didn't survive everything you've been through just to exist quietly in the shadows. You've been commissioned for kingdom work, seasoned by suffering, and anointed for impact. The world needs what you carry, and heaven is waiting for your obedience. Third, your time is now. Not someday when you feel more ready, not tomorrow when circumstances align perfectly, but today, right now. This moment is pregnant with divine possibility, and your next step of faith could unlock breakthrough not just for you, but for generations connected to your courage. You are not alone in this calling. God has not brought you this far to abandon you now. He who began this good work in you will complete it. And here in this community, you have thousands of fellow warriors who understand your journey because they've walked similar paths of death and resurrection. I want you to think about this question as we close. What would you attempt for God if you knew you couldn't fail? What dream would you resurrect? What voice would you find? What legacy would you leave? Now, let me pray over you with the authority of someone who has watched God resurrect the dead things in my own life. Father God, I place my hand on the heart of every person hearing this word right now. You see them not just their struggles, but their strength. Not just their scars, but their sacred calling. Lord, they have walked through valleys that would have destroyed lesser souls, and yet here they stand, breathing, believing, ready to be used by you. I pray that you would silence every voice of doubt, every whisper of unworthiness, every lie that tells them they're too old, too broken, too late. Replace those lies with your truth that they are fearfully and wonderfully made, chosen before the foundation of the world, anointed for such a time as this. Open doors that no man can shut. Make paths in their wilderness. Provide resources for their vision. Send divine connections to support their assignment. Give them boldness to speak, wisdom to lead, and grace to endure whatever opposition may come. Heal what still needs healing. Restore what was stolen. Multiply what they've sown in tears. Let them reap with joy what they planted in sorrow. And Lord, use their story, every painful chapter, every broken page to bring hope to others walking similar roads. In Jesus' mighty name, I declare over them, they are more than conquerors. They are joint heirs with Christ. They are the head and not the tail. They are blessed going in and blessed going out, and their latter days will be greater than their former days. Amen and amen. Before you leave this sacred space, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me, what has God stirred in your spirit today? What assignment is He calling you to embrace? Don't keep this revelation to yourself. Your testimony could be the lifeline someone else desperately needs. If this message has impacted your heart, please share it with someone who needs to know they're not forgotten, not finished, and certainly not forsaken. Let's build a community of the resurrected, the awakened, the ones who refuse to go quietly into the night. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. This isn't just content, it's a movement of souls awakening to their divine purpose. Together, we're proving that the best chapters are often written after the world thinks your story is over. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Thank you for opening your heart to hard truths and eternal possibilities. Thank you for believing that your life still matters, your voice still carries weight, and your assignment is still active. You came here feeling like something in you had died. You're leaving knowing that something eternal has been born. The angel